So for this Vloguary episode, I am here in what I call Florence Ada Keynes's cafe here in the Guildhall in Cambridge. My name is Anthony Carpen and this is Vloguary 2020. Now, I'm here just really for this episode to look at this thing. This is the Cambridge Corn Exchange's programme for winter, spring in the season 2020. It's not so much something that I'm going to be going through kind of line by line, act by act, saying, oh, come along to this one, don't come along to that one. It's more a wider look at basically saying this is why we need a bigger concert hall. That said, the one group I am looking forward at coming to see, that group, Caravan Palace. I've had my eye on them for over a decade. I first stumbled across them following a recommendation from an acquaintance who I met in Vienna many moons ago during my civil service days. And it was what got me into this music style called electro swing, kind of a decade before everybody else did, or before it arrived in London. And you're going to be hearing lots of it if you haven't heard about it already, because it's all things Roaring Twenties basically, and it's basically a 1920s music revival, for want of another term. In one sense, you could say it's portrayed as, oh, this is what the rich young people were doing in the 1920s, and they were listening to lots of cool music. What they also don't say was that they were also snorting huge amounts of illicit drugs at the same time, because the tempo of some of the rhythms is just like, you can't get under, get to those levels under just like normal levels of food. It's just like, you've got to be consuming something to A, be dancing at that tempo, and then B, keeping it going all night. And that's not to glamorise it, quite the opposite actually. It was a sign of some of the really nasty things that were happening during the 1920s, and obviously history records more of it in the Prohibition era. And it's although it was primarily a USA thing with prohibition of alcohol sales brought into law, we must not forget that in the run-up to the First World War there were huge campaigns for prohibition and temperance generally, and we saw lots of them in Cambridge. Now, if we come back to what I really wanted to talk about, which was the programme that they've got, you'll see a general theme for the Corn Exchange in recent times of them really bringing forward and showing groups that are either on their way down or have reached the kind of veterans reforming stage, or they are tributes of larger acts, or past and present, currently doing the rounds. Now, the sign of this, as far as I'm concerned, is that it shows Cambridge actually needs a bigger concert hall, for want of another thing. Now, if we take us back to the 1990s, with the indie Britpop craze, a number of really large bands at the time would regularly play at the Corn Exchange. We were on the list of venues that would be one of the places to go on a nationwide tour. The Junction in Cambridge was also one of those venues for the slightly smaller, perhaps more up-and-coming groups and acts, and in that decade I saw a number of them and was very privileged to do so. But it's got to the stage, and I think in particular because we are a growing city, growing at the pace that we currently are, one of the suggestions that my music director Andrea Cockerton mentioned was to actually turn the Corn Exchange into, perhaps a new set of offices or a startup venue, and use the money and the revenue to help pay for a brand new, larger concert hall. where you can actually get those much bigger accent performances in, and also at the same time not be in a situation where, as we are currently, losing money on the venues. Now, I've said in previous blog posts, it's at the Hills Road, Regent Street, Lensfield Road, Gonville Place junction, basically where the Cambridge Assessment Building currently is. That for me would be the site for the new concert hall. 3 times the geographical footprint of the Corn Exchange. It's by all of your transport routes, it's by a car park or 3, and it's also by a number of hotels. What more can you ask for? My name's Anthony Carpen. That's been another episode of Vloguary 2020.